Who are some top 2025 recruits to keep an eye on? Does Pitt have a chance to get back involved with any of the four-star recruits they've missed on? What's up with some of those four stars who still haven't announced? And a question that just might be more difficult than you think when it comes to trying to find an answer. All that and more on today's mailbag edition of the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, another Thursday edition of the mailbag here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We did it on Thursday last week because we had the Zach Austin interview lined up for Friday. Might have something for tomorrow. We'll see how things shake out. But I kind of like doing these mailbags on Thursday. We'll probably get back into doing them on Fridays, but Thursday seems fun for now. So we'll do this one here on Thursday on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what the deal is. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. It's the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. You're a Pitt fan, you want to talk to other Pitt fans, you want to go hang out with other Pitt fans, this is the place to do it. The message boards at Panther-Lair.com. So go check those out, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And of course, we have our YouTube page here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to the YouTube page. That way you'll never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content, the daily morning Pitt videos that we do each day, Monday through Friday, the live show on Wednesday nights. It's 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett get together and talk about everything going on in Pitt sports, football, basketball, and recruiting. And take your comments and questions, which is always a lot of fun to do. We have recruit interviews and player interviews and practice highlights and press conferences, all kinds of stuff right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You don't want to miss any of it. So like and subscribe. Like the video and subscribe to the YouTube page. And that way you won't miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. So we have our mailbag edition today. Like I said, we take questions on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, right there on the Between 5th and Forbes message board. You can post your questions. I always put out a call, usually every Tuesday or Wednesday. Hey, taking questions for the mailbag this week. And people reply to that thread and put as many questions as they can in there so that we have something to talk about here during the mailbag. And it's always fun. It's like you guys pick the topics, gives me something a little bit different to get into. And there's always questions left over from the previous week, so we're going to start there with a couple questions we didn't get to last week. And DUQ Dave asked, it seems like Pitt has to hold on for dear life to keep Day Farmer as a commitment, but the list of four-star guys who committed elsewhere, Pitt has no chance of ever getting them to flip their commitment. Can you speak to the communication from the Pitt side with the recruit who had them in their final list but committed elsewhere? Yeah, I think there's a couple things to discuss with that. I think it's a good question, Dave. Day Farmer, the four-star wide receiver who committed to Pitt on Christmas. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to end up signing with Pitt. I mean, I've seen positive comments from him about how he's going to stick with the Panthers, but I've also, seen comments from him since he committed on Christmas Day last December, where he said he's going to take more visits and he's going to look at other schools and all this kind of thing. So it always felt like that commitment was on shaky ground. And you'll have this. I mean, you can look at some of the guys that Pitt has gone after. I mean, a Sincere Edwards, for instance, or what's his name? Now I'm blanking on his name. The linebacker who was committed to Central Florida and took a visit to Pitt. They're in on some guys whose commitments are a little shaky, and they're trying to make a move on some of these guys. But I think it's a little bit different when you get into the final group with a recruit. You're in his top 3 or top 5 or whatever it is, and then he commits to another school. It's not entirely the same situation. Now, to your question about the communication between Pitt and recruits who commit elsewhere, I think you always hear that recruiting is about relationships, right? I mean, that's one of the mantras of recruiting, is about relationships. And throughout the recruiting process, you build those relationships. And I think even when a recruit commits elsewhere, you don't just go radio silence. There's really no upside in doing that. It hurts you zero. It costs you zero to reach out once a week, twice a week. Hey, how'd your game go? Hey, good luck this weekend. Hey, hope you're doing well. Hey, tell your mom happy birthday. Hey, all of those things, because you never know when it's going to be to your benefit to maintain that relationship. And if we want to believe that all of these relationships are genuine and sincere, then, if there was real sincerity and genuine feelings in the relationship before the kid committed, then you should want to keep in touch with them anyway. Just, this is someone you have a relationship with. This is someone you have a connection with. And it can pay off down the road if a kid decides he wants to flip, a coach gets fired at the school he's committed to, or something happens that makes him want to reopen his recruiting process. You don't want to be caught in a position where you're restarting the recruiting relationship with him. You want to just pick right up where you left off. And so you look at guys in the past like Rashad Weaver, Keyshawn Camp, Michael Salahuddin, some of the guys they've gotten late, Aaron Matthews, some of the guys they've gotten late in the process who were committed elsewhere, they maintained the relationship throughout that part of the process. So when they came open again in their recruitment, guess who already had that they weren't reaching out for the first time. I think if you decommit from a school and all of a sudden you hear from another school that you haven't talked to in 7 months, it's not going to be the same thing as if you decommit from a school and you pick back up the conversation with Corey Sanders or Taekwon Underwood or whoever, or Charlie Partridge, who you've been talking to. You just talked to him last week. And then, of course, you add in the extra element of the transfer portal. It really behooves you to stay in regular contact with these guys even after they commit. There's nothing to be gained by having hard feelings. There's nothing to be gained by being bitter or resentful or petty about it. Keep it all in good spirits. Keep it all, unless things really ended on an ugly note. Keep the spirits good, keep the relationship good, because there is a decent and increasing chance that it's going to pay off for you down the road. So that would be my thoughts on that. And who knows? Maybe somebody like a Coy Beasley or a Malachi Williams or Ryan Howerton, or any of these 4-stars that we've seen commit to schools other than Pitt over the past few weeks. Maybe in November they decide they want to go somewhere else. Maybe there's no room at their school anymore, or coach leaves, or there's any number of reasons why a kid might reopen his recruitment in late November or before signing day in December. You want to be there when it happens, and it's a lot easier to make it work if you keep that relationship active and healthy throughout the whole process. Myron Panther, and I don't know if this is a joke question or not, but it's really, really hard. It's a really difficult question, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on this. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of Pitt quarterbacks? And it's a comic bit, you know what I mean? That's such a classic cliched sports talk question. And so I almost wonder if it was asked in jest. But the reality is, it's actually a really hard question to answer. I mean, you got two. Two are very easy, right? Dan Marino and Kenny Pickett. Those two are on there. And I don't think there's any, discussion or disagreement about that. And I think they both occupy a pretty unique space in Pitt history. I remember during 2021, as there was conversation about, is Kenny Pickett the best quarterback in school history? This and that, I remember saying that the way I saw it, what it looked like was Dan Marino was the best quarterback in school history. Kenny Pickett had the best season by a quarterback in school history, because nothing really tops the 2021 season. What Kenny Pickett did that year, the team success, his personal achievements, his recognition as an All-American and a Heisman Trophy finalist and an all these, first team All-Conference, all those things. And the stats, I mean, just the pure numbers he put up stand as, some of the best in school history. I mean, it's the number one for passing yards in a season. I thought I had the other stat. Number one for passing touchdowns as a senior. Number one for the most passing touchdowns in a season. Number one for most passes completed in a game. All these things. Number one for most passes thrown in a single game in Pitt history. I mean, Kenny, his name's all over the record books on account of that season. And it was, like I say, the greatest season by a Pitt quarterback in school history. And Dan Marino, I think, still stands as the best quarterback in school history. So those two are easy. But if Mount Rushmore has 4 faces carved into it, it's pretty tough to figure out those other two. And what I found, and I really like pored over the media guide and tried to, I should have consulted with a few people to get some other opinions on this, but what I really came down to, and what ultimately got one guy I couldn't leave off, and it's weird to say in light of what has happened subsequently in his career, but Matt Cavanaugh is on the Mount Rushmore of Pitt quarterbacks. I mean, he really is. He was the MVP of the Sugar Bowl when Pitt beat Georgia to win the national championship. He was the national championship winning quarterback. Won the Sugar Bowl in 1977. Like I say, he was the MVP of that game. He was the MVP. I assume, I don't know who was the MVP of the night of the following year's Gator Bowl when he set the Gator Bowl record for passing yards, threw for 387 yards to beat Clemson, number 11 Clemson. Pitt was number 10 at the time. His name is not all over the record books the way Pickett and Marino are. That 387-yard game against Clemson is the number 18 all-time single-game passing performance in Pitt history. He doesn't have, he's not on the top 10 of passing yards in a season, not in the top 15 of passing yards in his career, but he was an All-American, he was a draft pick, and again, the quarterback of a national championship team, and the MVP of a national championship winning game. And when you consider the competition, if you look at accomplishments, I don't know who else you would put above Cavanaugh other than, Marino and Pickett. It seems to me like he's on the short list, like the list of 4, And then for number 4, I don't know who do you pick? Rod Rutherford for 2 great years with Larry Fitzgerald. Alex Van Pelt. I actually lean toward Van Pelt. Before Kenny Pickett came along and played that extra season, Van Pelt had a record that seemed like it would never be broken. 11,267 career passing yards, almost 3,000 more passing yards than Marino had in his career. Marino was number 2, Van Pelt was number 1. Pickett rocketed up and cleared 12,000, which now is a record I'm pretty sure will never be surpassed. Van Pelt has 2 of the top 10 seasons in school history in passing yards, 1992 and 1989. Passing yards in a game. Just kind of glancing over that. His best single game was 384 yards. He was more of a cumulative, playing so many games, just logging so many snaps and passes. But I mean, the numbers kind of separate him. And nobody else is probably ever going to get to 11,000 passing yards in their Pitt career unless, football keeps moving further and further toward the passing model, which, could happen, seems to be happening. But, Van Pelt is probably the guy. And I guess if you want a good illustration of the level of quarterback play at Pitt over the years, you've got 2 obvious guys in Marino and Pickett, 2, first-round draft picks. And then you get to Matt Cavanaugh and Alex Van Pelt. that's kind of, and there's really not any good options to really compete with those guys. I should have consulted with some historians to see if they have any other options to throw out there. But I think that's probably your Mount Rushmore, is those four guys. But I'd definitely like to hear your comments and questions, your reaction of who you would put on your Mount Rushmore of Pitt, your Mount Rushmore of Pitt quarterbacks, because that was a tough question. I had to really dig in for some research on that. 121 Rum says, you may have already answered this, but what road trip game are you most excited about? Exchanging New York City for Syracuse has to be a big plus, and you don't even have to miss out on Dinosaur Barbecue if you so choose. I'm still deciding on what road trips I'm going to go on. I've been staying home from road trips for a few years. Jim's going to go to some of them. I forget exactly what his list is going to be. If I was going to every road trip this year, I've said it before. Notre Dame's really high on the list for the game experience. That game against Syracuse in Yankee Stadium would probably be pretty high on the list for everything around the game experience. I'm not sure how great the game experience is going to be. Watching them play against Syracuse, watching them play in a baseball stadium, that doesn't sound all that appealing, but you do get to be in New York City. You get to spend a weekend in New York City, which is, I'll take any excuse to do that. I'll take any reason to do that. Other road trips, was just kind of glancing over the list to see if there was anything else interesting. I mean, West Virginia is always West Virginia. You want to go down there for a primetime game on a Saturday night, via Con Dios. Virginia Tech and Blacksburg, it's fine. I didn't think it really lived up to the hype, but it's fine. Wake Forest and Winston-Salem, there's no reason really to do that. And then Duke and Durham, I mean, ditto. I've been to Durham a couple of times. I've been to Wake Forest once when Pitt played there in 2018, and that was a worthwhile trip because they clinched the Coastal in that game. But it's not like Winston-Salem really intrigued me all that much, and nor did Durham. I didn't have a bad time in those places, but wasn't really all that exciting. If I was going to pick a road trip this year, it would either be New York City for the weekend or Notre Dame. If you haven't been to Notre Dame, you should probably go to Notre Dame. You could find other reasons to go to New York City. You don't need to go there to watch Pitt Syracuse. But if you've never been to Notre Dame, you should go to Notre Dame and watch Pitt play out there. That'll be worth your time. Let's see. Next question. R. Doyle 65 says, any idea of a timeline when Yassine Willis or Sincere Edwards plan on announcing commitments publicly? And I don't. I have no idea what's going on there. We think both of those guys committed during their official visits. Edwards, a 4-star defensive end. Willis, a 4-star running back. It was all quiet and hush-hush initially. It's just sort of gotten more sort of understood and assumed that they did. But no idea why neither one has said anything since their official visits. I don't think they've done, interviews recapping the visits. They certainly haven't announced any plans for announcing their commitments. Everyone I talked to in a lot of different spaces is still sort of surprised that neither guy has made an announcement yet. But just waiting. And I hate to say this, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm guessing we'll see more and more of this over the next few years. I mean, we saw some of it. I talked about this, I don't know, a few weeks ago on a Morning Pitt or in a 3-2-1 column. I forget exactly. But we saw some of this last year. We saw a couple of guys really drag it out from the time they committed to the time they actually announced. And we're seeing even more of it this year. And I think it's just going to keep going. And I think there's a variety of reasons behind that. But I don't see that trend slowing down. If we have a year where it doesn't happen or there's only 1 or 2 guys who does it, then that'll be the anomaly, I think. I think we're just going to be stuck in these situations where you're waiting for guys to announce. Chet the Jet, and it's not actually Chet the Jet. It's like Che the Jet. So I apologize. I've always called you Chet the Jet. I've always read it as Chet the Jet. Says the thinking was at least 25 recruits coming in this year's class. Now with some misses on a couple defensive ends and the safety and the quarterback situation not settled, is 25 still the number? 2 commits are pending, so with slimmer pickings unless they can flip a player or two, not looking like the class we all hoped. So we think they've got 22 commitments right now. If you assume attrition 1 or 2, probably sitting in around 20 that we can assume, right? They've got 24 scholarship seniors. Now, not all those guys are automatically out of eligibility. Some, like MJ Devonshire, Bengali Kamara, Brandon George, DeAndre Jules, Nate Temple, Deion Hayes, Bam Brema, Ryan Jacoby, Mackin Salves, Jason Collier, Carter Johnson, Bub Means, Daniel Carter. Those guys all have eligibility remaining that they could come back. You're not guaranteed to have all 24 of those seniors leave the roster. Probably a couple will return. I don't think there'll be a ton. I think year after year, and we've said this for a couple of years now, that those super seniors, the number of super seniors will keep decreasing. Fewer and fewer guys will take that extra year and come back. And in another year or two, we'll be cycled out of them altogether. We'll be out of the guys who have that super senior eligibility available to them. So you might not end up with 24 scholarships available from departing seniors, but you'll still probably end up with enough available scholarships to bring in 24 to 27 new players. And I have to say it like that, new players, because we have to, and we have to continue to adjust our thoughts on what newcomers look like. It's not just high school kids anymore. It's transfers. And so Pitt might bring in 25, 26, 27 new players this offseason. They won't all be recruits. And I don't think I ever really thought they were going to have a 25-man recruiting class. I might have talked about that as an extreme. In certain instances, I think for the most part, I've hovered around the 21 to 23 number, which I think is probably what they'll end up with. Maybe push it to 24 high school kids, but you're still going to make up numbers with the transfers. And quite frankly, if they sign 22 or 23 high school kids, they might take 6 or 7 transfers and end up with 30 new players, because you're going to, in addition to those seniors who leave, you're going to have transfers who leave your program as well from some of the underclass groupings. So I still think they're going to end up in those numbers. Missing on the guys they've missed on, that doesn't change my expectation for where the class is going to end up. Like I say, I think they've got 2 commitments who have not yet announced, so that's kind of sort of drifting out there. You figure there'll be some attrition here and there, and maybe end up right around 20 commitments, 22 commitments heading into the season. And then, there's always going to be a couple late ads in the process, either guys who develop late on the radar or guys who flip, or there are any number of reasons, but we've seen this every year. What the class is on September 1st is not what the class is going to be on December 1st, and quite frankly, it might not be what the class is on January 1st. There are going to be changes, there are going to be transitions. And so I think they'll still end up in those numbers. I don't think they'll get to 25 high school kids. That was never really my expectation to begin with. But they'll end up with, like I say, 21 to 23, and then they'll fill out a bunch of transfers, because this is what recruiting is going to look like. And I wouldn't be surprised if in subsequent seasons, even if they have 25 available scholarships, they take 17 recruits, high school kids, because they're going to fill in so much of their roster with transfers. This is where things are shifting and evolving. So, everybody had their own expectations on what this class would look like. I still think it's going to largely look like what I thought: 21 to 23 guys, 6 4-stars. And maybe the best class of the Narduzzi era. Probably the best class of the Narduzzi era. That's still where I'm leaning, even though the last few weeks Pitt fans have been down in the dumps because there hasn't been a new commitment in a while. But that's still what I see. And it would be nice if a couple of these guys, like we mentioned, like Willis and Edwards, would just announce their commitments. That would help. That would help for sure. All right, thanks to everybody who submitted questions for this week's mailbag. We still had a few left over, so we'll get to those next week. And if you want to be part of the mailbag, you can just put your question into one of the mailbag threads. Either this most recent one that we started this week, or when I start the next one next Tuesday on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. You can put your question in there, and we'll answer as many as we can right here on the Morning Pitt Mailbag. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then head over to the website, Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, to never miss any Pitt sports news. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope you've had a great week so far. We're almost to the weekend, so enjoy your Thursday, and we will talk to you again tomorrow morning on the Morning Pitt right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.